title of the talk. Contacting Adepts Through Tarot Meditation. Now, as you know, I've often tried to point out to you that we have a great deal of confusion in relation to the idea as to what an adept is. Some people think an adept is a master. Some people think an adept is one who has passed all tests and has no more problems. Most spiritual aspirants, when they hear the word adept, their hearts lift with eagerness to become one. And of course, those of you who have heard previous talks of mine or have proceeded with the lessons that you receive through the mail, certainly at least in the advanced courses, would have come to realize that being an adept does not mean that one is a master, nor does being an adept necessarily mean being anything as extraordinary as we usually think, because actually everything is more or less relative. In other words, certainly a 10-year-old child is an adept if it is compared to the 5-year-old child when it comes to mental motor coordination. And certainly the 10-year-old child is an adept in relation to the 5-year-old child, or if you want to compare these two areas or levels of development when it comes to the ability to read. However, the 10-year-old child, what is this 10-year-old child in relation to the 15-year-old child? See, we're jumping the next 5 years. In relation to mental motor coordination and in relation to ability to read. If this child has continued to practice reading, and if, no, Felix, must be pink, sorry, and if, nice to be able to think of 3 things at once. Twice, 2 easily, 3 slightly more effort, not much. And if this child has really worked at trying to develop reading, not by trying, but by being interested, because all development has to do with interest. If you're not interested, your efforts do not bear fruit, because the mind wanders away and you can't absorb things in any case. It's interest that comes from desire. That's why desire starts all things. In any case, wherever you can say desire has been deep enough, this is where you will have had a concentration of interest. And this concentration of interest will have developed ability, and this ability will have developed adeptship in that particular area. So to be an adept means what? It means to be adept in certain areas. Now you're thinking, but a master is adept in all areas. Well, this cannot really be true. Only God is adept in all areas. And in order to express this all-in-all adeptship, God definitely expresses these areas of adeptship in and through channels that have been grown or evolved, which are able to receive and express, which are able to receive and develop and express these particular phases or kinds of adeptship. So we must be clear in our minds as to what the word adept means. Most of us get all caught up, basically, because we do not realize that we must analyze our emotional reaction to words, just plain words. And our emotional reactions to words come about because we have decided every word has a special, absolute meaning. And certain sciences have developed from this realization, which are called the sciences of semantics. So we have general semantics, and then we have other phases of semantics. We have dictionaries, for example, that tell us what each word means. But then even knowing what a word means, every word takes on a different meaning in connotation with its times or its climes. Each modern age, each group of adolescents, each group of those who rebel, develop certain subtle descriptivenesses that relate to what they mean when they use a word, which would be other than most other people think in relation to the word. We could give a few examples. For instance, the word baby. Now, basically, baby means an infant. But now, a man and or a woman can use the word baby as a term of endearment. And yet a baby is an infant, isn't it? An infant usually under a year old. But it has developed into something that can be thought of as a term of endearment. It's also been developed into a slang term by some people, like play the game, baby. And as a term of familiarity between apparent adults. If I say, listen, baby, it could also mean that I'm telling you, look, I'm cutting you down to size. So it could mean, it's also become a term of opprobrium, or insult, a subtle insult. You see? So what does a word mean? Now, we react emotionally to a word. And inasmuch as we react to words, we become conditioned to the ideas that are behind words. And becoming conditioned to the ideas that are behind words, we become slave to our own misinterpretations of words. And we can raise our blood pressure. We can get our heartbeat going 3, 4, 5, 10 times higher than it ought to. We can go into rebellious states. We can go into states of despair. We can forget that as kids we'd raise our noses and sneer a little bit and say, sticks and stones can break my bones, but names will never harm me or hurt me. We decide, I'm harmed. We act as though somebody's put us in a psychological electric chair when they use certain words. We act as though it is the supreme reality. Talk about the power of sound. Isn't it fabulous? The power of the word. Isn't it extraordinary? And those of us who are slaves to other people's ideas or thoughts or use of word, which means other people's ideas about us. We then can certainly be said to be very lacking in adeptship as far as being free of the suggestiveness or hypnotic reaction to other people's thoughts and emotions expressed in words. You know, lots of people think that they are extraordinarily freely strong-minded and that they cannot, for example, be hypnotized. I've heard many people say, oh, I just can't be hypnotized. Now, in the books you read on hypnosis, it is claimed that the more intelligent people are the most easily hypnotized, and the least intelligent people cannot be hypnotized. So to brag about the fact that we cannot be hypnotized, if it is true, it might be a wise idea to keep quiet about it, provided we all had information. You see, we use words, we don't know what we're doing, and this shows a lack of adeptship. And we're not using powers, the power of sound, the power of the word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Remember, Adam named the creatures. The word and the name is the power. We give things power by what we say about them. And what we say about these things is what we think about them and what we permit ourselves to think and feel about them. And the power, therefore, is in us. Now, to the degree we control what we're going to think and feel, or redirect our thinking and feeling, more in terms of positive, constructive, and ideal situations that we wish to see eventually, to that degree are we adepts. To the degree that we permit any immediate word from anybody else, any immediate suggestion, which is a word again, from anybody else, any immediate vibration in terms of a condition or situation, from anybody or anything else, to affect us, where we feed it back by hunting for its negative interpretation, which we do, don't we now? To that degree are we lacking in adeptship at handling or mastering, that is, or controlling the condition in accordance with the higher or the more desired outcome from a higher level. Now, being adept can include being adept at negativity. You see, we have an idea that being an adept means that it's all constructive. Haven't you known people who are very adept at being liars? Very adept at being thieves? Very adept at rationalizing? Very adept at keeping themselves from feeling for others? Very adept at keeping themselves from living? Very adept at keeping themselves locked in the prisons of just one-pointed or fanatical ideas instead of being able to respond to larger pictures. This is adepthood. So you get ideas of the evil adepts and the good adepts. But isn't that a matter of interpretation? It depends on who decides what's good and who decides what's evil. If a whole bunch of people decide that it is evil to want to teach, say, the principles of international harmony because it makes us insecure as a nation. You know how many people are doing that? Under the name of patriotism, maybe? Well, does that make it really evil? Or not? Or is it the opposite? In other words, people can call a good evil, and if we are suggestible, we'll receive it. people can call an evil good, and if the mind and heart is open to hypnotic suggestion, it will receive it. People will think they want good, but if their minds and hearts remain open to the hypnotic suggestions of negative, pain, sorrow, chest beating, horror, fear, a part may want one thing and another part may want another. But you remember what is said in the Bible about a house divided? Those who watch TV or listen to the radio, and there's only one thing we hear or see, and that's insanity. Does anyone here wish to disagree to that? But I'll tell you something. Approximately 2/3 here would consider the insanity comes from a group who teaches one, or who are slanted in their what they say to one side of the picture. The other third would go the other way. Not even 50-50. And I'm not going to tell you which is what. I will not. A true spiritual teacher does not. It's up to you to do your growing and recognize it for yourselves. The point is, we are all exposed continuously to the evil impacts of separatism. And we react to it with that extraordinary egomania of I have to be right and they're all you-know-whats. They're wrecking the world, they're wrecking society. They're wrecking this and they're wrecking that, and it is always they. Last Thursday night's class, I mentioned paranoia. I upset a lot of people when I pointed out that all of us, after all, have times when we're paranoidally inclined. And it's the degree. We all have times when we're schizophrenically inclined, and there are degrees. We all have times when we're so withdrawn that you might almost call us in the schizophrenic catatonic state, but there are degrees. And all of us, therefore, need to feel that we're not so separate from anybody else. And we've all of us been exposed to being forced to do somebody else's will. Furthermore, we've all forced somebody else to do our will. So we're not so distant from the tyrannies of life, though we like to stand up and use strong statements as though we are beyond this. Now, the adept, the true adept, I wonder why you come to this church. You know why I don't wonder. I just say it to make you look into your own hearts. You know why you come. Because here we do not cater to nonsense. We love you enough. We love you enough to help you to look into your own heart. And if you haven't got the strength, you'll go somewhere else where they say you're perfect. And you are. But you're not perfect as far as having attained the capacity to express it yet. Let's say you're growing towards the ability and capacity to express it. It's like an embryo maybe a perfect embryo at whatever stage, but it isn't perfect enough to breathe on its own yet. And that's what makes the difference. And it takes a very strong soul with true aspiration to be willing to come and hear certain things that relate to the inner and secret thinking and feeling, and that hit at one's own self-satisfaction, that hit at the very things that make us think we're spiritual, doesn't it now? And so when you get disturbed, which you inevitably must in the process of growth, the thing I want you to remember is that it takes a very beautifully strong soul, therefore an old soul, and therefore a soul that has developed the capacity for objectivity, therefore to look at portions of itself and say, yes, this part of me is still only 12 years old approximately. This part is acting more like the rebellious 17, 18-year-old. This part of me is still acting like 2 years old, and after all, who needs that like a hole in the head, you know? Without tearing your hair, because when you're tearing your hair, then you're acting like the paranoid or schizo, and it's unnecessary. It's the sense of humor with these ideas. But it takes a very old and strong soul to have reached the point where it's willing to come for self-transmutation. And the rejoicing comes because it's willing to see, I am the master of my fate. And you know, who else is? God is the master of our fate. But what and who is God? God is that eternal center in every one of us. That is why we are one. And that pushes and pushes and presses and pressures us into the growth. That's what evolution is. The inevitable growth which helps us to understand the previous thinkings, the previous feelings, the previous nonsense, and instead of beating our chest and saying how I am at fault, I was evil, I was guilty, instead of all that nonsense, to say I was immature and ye gods, it's time I grow up, and to work desperately to grow up, mainly because you're so damn tired of being miserable and reaping the horrible and ever more horrible repercussions of the nonsense of immaturity, which is evil in its small sense, which forces growth. But as long as we have to beat our chests to feel important and say it's because I'm evil or I'm helpless, you're not helpless. You're not one bit helpless. When you're tired of being miserable, there's suddenly a well of strength from the infinite everythingness. When you're tired of being miserable, there is something in you that will not dare let go. And when you do let go, it'll remember faster and faster. And those who say, I cannot help it, they haven't been miserable enough, even though they may claim they've been more miserable than anybody else ever was. I remember when I was 12, I knew that I had already suffered more than any human being that had ever lived on this earth. I didn't think so. I knew it. And I knew it with every fiber of my being. And then I heard a very intimate friend of my mother's, whose name, curiously enough, came up in my life rather often after that. Her name was Sadie. I heard her say that she had suffered more than any human being on the face of the earth. Then I heard my mother say that she had suffered more than any human being on the face of the earth. Then I heard 6 other people say the same thing. Now, the first 2 or 3 times I heard it, I looked at these people compassionately and I thought how deluded they are. How deluded. They think so. But of course, it's only true of me. But it's the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh. By this time, I started to get worried. And then it hit me with great disturbance. I thought, my God, everybody thinks so. So I went out and started to ask questions. You know me, the eternal researcher. Maybe I'm in a state of arrested development in terms of research. But I love to research in order to bring you the results of it. This is the point. So I started to ask questions. Every time I saw someone who looked like they thought they were the most miserable people on the earth, and you know, it shows in the eyes and in the expression, or who made some remark, because I thought, why waste time with those who haven't stopped to think about it? A lot of people never even think about these generalized things. Now, have they got that amount of ego? You know, that just those of us who have plenty of ego get to thinking of things in those terms. Not that there's anything wrong with ego, it's rather, the ego becomes negative if we have it turned in on ourselves, or start letting God be the eternal ego working in and through us. It's a matter of its usage. So I started to ask various people who gave indications, and I discovered that practically everybody who was super miserable, either secretly or very unsecretly and most verbally, were quite certain that they suffered more than anybody else. As I said, although it took me a little while, it was not until the 8th, ninth, 10th, or 11th person that I sadly realized maybe I wasn't the one who really had suffered the most, maybe only next to the most, but who would it be the most then? I still never could. And to this day, I can't quite believe it. Well, that's something to help you chuckle. The point is, pain is utterly unbearable to the one who has it. And what to one person would seem like not so much pain when we look at somebody else's, it's really more like, it's pretty easy to bear up under somebody else's hurt. It's easier to be noble and spiritual when it's somebody else that hurts. Not that it mightn't hurt you. You might be soft, compassionate, loving. It might hurt you very deeply and excruciatingly indeed. But it's easier to bear up under somebody else's hurt. And so we have a way of thinking that our hurt is the worst, that we have suffered the most, that our physical agony has been the most. We have a way. And those who suffered the most intensely usually feel theirs has to be the most, and yet it ain't necessarily so. It isn't necessarily so. It may be that the focus is just so centered, hypnotically centered, that these people amongst us, that includes us, are not permitting the healing energies to take over that are there, waiting, even trying. We hang on to a negative. We hang on to, we beat our brains, we beat our emotions with a mental, an emotional, or a physical, or a combination of all three. We beat and deepen the currents of these ideas in ourselves. And even with our aspiration, we keep using pain as the reason instead of what should be a much better reason than pain for trying and wanting to attain to the infinite joy, to the infinite love, to the infinite freedom, to the infinite health, and the infinite good. And what should that be? To become adept, to become an adept at recognizing the negative thought, recognizing the negative emotion, recognizing the hypnotic suggestion instantly and saying, out, hence, hence, get going, away, I have no truck with you. I will not feed you with my blood. I will not feed you with my soul. I will not feed you with the currents of my vital bodies. I will not feed you with my spirit. I have better things to do in my Father's house and in this realm of glory. I will search for beauty and not for ugliness. I won't let my eyes rove around to see what's hurt. Things hurt in evolution under any condition. I'll search for the thing that one takes for allergy. If you have an allergy, you have histamines that are growing, developing in your system. So you take antihistamines. I will make my consciousness an antihistamine as far as I'm able. And that's when we start getting help from everything and everybody. Now, an adept, then, is one who recognizes immediately the negatives that come in the words, that come in the thoughts, that come in the emotions from oneself or others, and stops it cold from influencing. One who sees what's going to damage a relationship and stops it cold. One who sees what's going to affect the atmosphere for oneself, one's children, one's family, and stops it cold, and reaches to something higher to replace that thought, that emotion, that energy. Nobody else is going to do it for us, but the whole influx of the universal good will come in and help us if we open the cup for it. So it isn't that we have to do all of it for ourselves because we don't have to. What we do have to do, though, is to work at keeping that cup open, and that's where the meditation with the tarot helps so profoundly, and with all of the exercises we give you here in BOTA, both the work you get at home and the work we do together in temple, in all phases of the work. Prineus, classes, Sunday services, and of course the chapter. There aren't too many, we have very few. That takes special temperaments, which a few of you have, and those who don't, as time goes on. We watch you and always hope you will. But what is it then that is involved there? It's this. Telepathically, we always attune ourselves or become attuned with that which is in harmony with our own focus of attention. I will repeat that. Telepathically, we always attune ourselves and become attuned to that which we are in harmony with in terms of what we give attention to. Do you realize what that means? What are you paying attention to? What are you paying attention to? That's what you are attuning yourself to. That's the idea of your area of control. The rest is done by all the adepts and angels and archangels and gods and the forces of the universe and the infinite love. Wherever we put our attention, all the forces of infinite love flow forth and concentrate it. To the degree we have power to concentrate, to that degree does the love of the universe come in and bring us the force of our attention. You say, pain? Why not? Isn't that where we're focusing our power? Consciousness, attention. Who brings us anything? There's only one being in all the universe, and that is God. You are a cell, an aspect of the one life. You are evolving from a 2-year-old to a 5-year-old to a 10-year-old to an 18-year-old, a 21-year-old, and to a ripe 30, and we never get older than 30 beauty-wise. The height. But wisdom-wise, infinite and unending. Knowledge-wise, infinite and unending. So remember, what we put our concentrated attention to, this brings to us, and all of us, just like the sun shines on the so-called just and the so-called unjust. God pours to all. The power of the universe pours to all. What we put our attention to, what we keep our attention upon, this is what is fed. And you and I, all of us, as a center of the consciousness of God, attune ourselves to the adepts in that area or level. Criminally inclined, put your attentions there, and all the adepts of crime are one with us and we with them. And there are adepts in crime. And the repercussions thereof. Escapists, put your attention on escapism. All the adepts of escapism and methods of escapism will become one with us and we with them. And this is the riches of life. And does it mean God is evil? No, we are growing and have to learn how to use our infinite powers. This is what it amounts to. Put our consciousness on love. All the love of the universe will shower us, so we'll wonder how we can get away from a little bit of it. Have you ever thought maybe it might be a good idea? Not really. No one wants to get away from love. All we might ever want to do is get away from somebody's idea that they're loving when all they want to do is grab and entrap. By entrap, I mean imprison. It's like grabbing a moth or a butterfly. You know, saying I love you and locking it away. You know, that's not love. You know, killing it off in the name of love. That's the thing, naturally, we don't or shouldn't welcome. And we should watch ourselves to make sure we don't inflict this on others, because we do things in the name of love that this is not love. These are the growing things. The attuning ourselves to adepts, then, has to do with where we hold and concentrate our consciousness. Now, when we work with tarot keys, we are working with the highest level of adeptship in the spiritual sense, because so many aspirants have worked and work with these tarot keys, aspiring towards the controls of the higher levels. We are one with God, God is one with us. We are controlling the higher levels of our thinking and feeling. No matter what is happening in our everyday life, remember, no matter what is happening in our everyday life, no matter what has happened in our past, this has to do with where consciousness has been focused. It has nothing to do with what can happen tomorrow or one moment from now with change of focus. Everything changes every fraction of every second throughout all of eternity, which is not time, but foreverness. It has nothing to do with time. It changes. It doesn't matter how many disappointments we've had. It doesn't matter how much sickness. It doesn't matter how much sorrow. It doesn't matter how much anything negatively. If that was in the past, it's from focus on those levels of consciousness. It is attunement to the depths of that level, which means the evil levels or the immature levels. And it is true of the nicest people. Call others SOBs. And what do you think you're really doing? You're attracting SOBs. You deserve them. And one who loves you wants you to have them. So you'll... Yes. So that you'll discover how to use your powers properly. Does it mean everybody is going to be beautiful? No, because in a life of growth, you meet the tests of SOBs, but you also attract the beauties that lift your heart and soul. And you discover that, so what? You have 2-year-olds, and they annoy you, they're problems, okay. But in an infinite growing evolution, so what? This is being an adept. You're going to beat your chest. You're going to make yourself get sick so that you keep the physical body a lesser period. Every year you lose of holding the physical body here after gaining this wisdom, kind of a waste. You're going to have to redo it that much more often later. Why waste this time? You are in a gorgeous position. You have the ability to learn how to focus your attention on the spiritual levels of adeptship through these tarot keys, through the work we do here, through my love for you. Do you know I don't know how to keep my consciousness on anything negative anymore? You know why? I don't dare. I mean, no credit to me. People say, how can you be so strong? I'm not strong. Really. I just don't dare. Because the older you get spiritually, the more instantly a repercussion. Now, if the minute I hold a negative thought about something, it comes boomerang back at me from every direction. I mean, wouldn't it become a stupidity? That's all it amounts to. Okay. And this is what occurs. Now, you have reached a point where it keeps coming back at you more and more rapidly, and you know it, don't you? Where you had to wait for the repercussions, where you thought you're getting away with things. You're not getting away with it so much anymore, and isn't that wonderful? Your own higher soul is forcing you to become more positive. Say, thank you, God. And even when you can't feel positive, refuse to think negative. You see that? So that it has to wear itself out, just hanging on to a picture, and that's a tarot key. And then the healing forces come in, the angels, the archangels, just because you're not holding them away by feeding the nonsense. I could talk to you for 10 hours on this. 110. But we have to have a short healing service, at least. Oh, and here it says, remember collection. Which I always forget, as you know.